Welcome back. This is a short tutorial on how to use TinkerCAD Codeblock loops. Let's get into it. So here we are in TinkerCAD, and we're in the Codeblock section. What we're going to do is we're going to manipulate an object, and we're going to use loops to be able to manipulate that object. So let's check it out. The first thing that we need is some kind of object. I'm going to start off by going up to text and grabbing a text object. So I'm just going to grab some text. In the text area, you can go over here and you can put text in, and you can make it different heights, different sizes, all that stuff. So let's go ahead and check out how we can do that. Here's our text area here. Here you can change what the text says. Here you can change what the height is. You can also change what the font is right here. Not a whole lot of options in font, but there you go. You can play with them here. So we can see it says text. We can change the color to whatever color we want. And we can also change the text to be whatever we want it to be as well. Just so you know, there's also alt codes that you could potentially use. So you can use any letter of the alphabet. You can write things with the alphabet here. You can be able to play around with that to be able to change what the font says. But there's also alt codes. If you don't know what alt codes are, you can press Alt and hold down the Alt key, and then you can type numbers, and those numbers will be various symbols. So I'm going to press play here, and you can see that I have a symbol for a happy face here. You can use any of the alt codes. If you want to look up alt codes on the internet, you'll be able to see what the different alt codes for Unicode text are. And there's a lot of great ones out there. So check them out. See what the different alt codes are. Those also work in the text here. So if you wanted to use those, there's a whole bunch of great ones there. There's all the different cards, the different types of card deck classes and all that here, so different types of cards. There's also height here, so we can change what the height of it is. Great, all this is pretty interesting. But let's talk a little bit about how we can use loops. So right now I have this single piece of text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this an object. So to make it an object, you can go down here where it says modify, and we can add a new object type. Now here we want to name what this object is. We can see that it's object 0 by default, but you want to rename it. So I'm going to call this a spade, which is what it is. Call a spade by a spade. There it is. Alright, so we've got the new object spade here, and now I can create a new object, and I'm going to call this line of spades. So I'm going to rename this and call it line of spades. There we go. So I'm going to make a new object, which is going to be a line of spades, and we're going to play around with the loop idea to be able to create this. Now you could use the repeat a certain number of times, and that will be okay, but there's not as much control with that as there is with the next loop, which is using an iterative variable, is what we call it, an iterative variable. So I'm going to click on this and drag this loop in here, and we're going to play around with this idea and see what all these are. So we can see here that it says count with I. We can rename that to whatever we want. Well, I'm just going to keep it as I. From 1 to 10. So this is the range that this loop runs in. You can see here that it's going to basically start, every time it runs this loop, it's going to start the I variable at this number, and it's going to stop the loop once the I variable gets to this number. And it's going to count up by whatever you put in here. So right now it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it's going to stop. If I put 100 here, it would do this 100 times, and then it would stop. If I put 5 in here, it would go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it would stop. So this is like your lower range, the number it starts on, and this is the number that it ends on. And what happens is this concept of I, this variable, is going to increase every time, and you can use that I variable inside the code. Let's check out how we can do that. So what I'm going to do is every time this loop happens, I'm going to add a copy of an object. And you're going to see that the object right now, it's this empty space. If you want to fill it in with something, if you scroll down to the bottom here, you're going to see this thing for data. This is why we made a new object, because this object, this thing, is called a spade. And down here we can see that spade is under data, and this is the variables that are saved right now. There's I as a variable, there's spade as a variable, and there's this new line of spades variable that is created. So I'm going to grab this spade, and I'm going to drag that into add copy of object. So it's going to make a copy of the spade. If I just press play and run this right now, it's just going to make a bunch of copies, but you can't tell there's a bunch of copies because it's all inside of the original spade here. So what I want to do is I want to move this spade out. I want to, each time it makes a copy of an object, I want it to move that copy of the object over to the side here. So to do that, I'm going to use the move tool, or the move modifier here. And we can see here that it's going to move by x0, y0, z0. So what I could do is I could put the I variable in for x, and it's going to move it by 1 the first time, then 2, then 3, then 4, and it's going to move them over to the side here every time. Let's check it out. I'm going to slow it down so we can see what happens. So you can see that this loop, it's going to start from the top and move it over each time. And you can see that it's just moving it over a little bitty bit. It's moving it by 1 of these squares. Every time it creates a new one, it's just moving it over by 1 of these little diagonals here. So what if I wanted it to move it by 10, which is basically 10 of these little squares, each one by 10. To do that, I have to use a math tool. So down here under math, you're going to see this thing that looks like a 0 plus 0 right here. I'm going to drag that out, and I'm going to make it, instead of plus, I'm going to make it times. So, which is the little star right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this I variable and make it I times 10. So it's going to start at 1, and it's going to move it over. The first time it's going to move it over 1 times 10. The next time it's going to move it over 2 times 10, 3 times 10, and so on. Let's check out what it does now. I basically multiplied the amount that it moves each time by 10. Let's check it out. I press play. And now if we look at this, ooh, all right. You can see now every time it moves, it's going to move over by 10 of those little lines, which is each one of these kind of bigger, thicker lines here. So each unit of value is one of these tiny little blocks. That's going to help us understand how we can move around these things. Now, what if we wanted it to also move diagonally up? We could take the same idea here and duplicate it, and we can move it in the z direction, which means that it's going to move up the blue axis as well as the x-axis. Look at that. Let's press play. Check it out. There it is, the first one. The next one moves up. Ooh, okay. So we're able to play around with these different objects and move them in different directions. Maybe I don't want it to go up as high every time for the z-axis. Maybe I only want it to go up half of that, like 5. So I'll put 5 right here, I times 5. So every time it redoes its loop, it's going to move up by 5. Let's press play and check it out. Ooh. Oh, yeah, okay, that looks a little bit better. I kind of like that. All right, excellent. You can also, the copies of objects, you can make different colors if you want to, and you can also make them, turn them into holes if you wanted to cut them out of a different object. Pretty useful to know how to do all this stuff. Every copy that we make, everything that we do inside of this loop will happen every single time it goes. So if I wanted to resize this object, I could do that. I could put scale, for example. I could grab scale, and maybe I want it to shrink every time it makes a new version or a new object here. A way I could do that is I could grab math, and I'll put the I variable in here, and I'll make it multiply by 0.5. So every time it'll get half as big as it currently is. Ooh, okay. Let's check that out. I'm going to put that here for x. I'm going to actually put it, if you take over all of the x, y, and z, if you take it all the way out, I'm going to show you. You could put this into just one of these, which will mean that it's only going to scale the x by this amount. Or if you put it all the way at the end, you can see that you can kind of hover this on the left-hand side. You can make it hover and take over any one of these. And I could duplicate this 3 times and pop them in for each one of these. But you can also make it take over the whole thing, and then it's going to scale the entire object each time, the x, y, and z axes. Let's check it out. So now every time it makes a copy, it's also going to scale it and make it half as big as the other one. Or actually, it starts off 1 times 0.5, which makes the first one half as big. And then the next time it's 2 times 1.5, which makes it originally, whatever the original size was. And look, it's getting bigger each time. Look at that. Interesting. We can come up with all kinds of interesting shapes this way. If we go in here and make this, instead of times 0.5, I can divide it by 2, which that would do what I originally wanted to do, which is cut it in half. Let's check it out. Or actually, sorry, that's if we take that and divide it by half. Yeah, that's the same thing as what would happen last time. Because this number grows every time. So it's going to It's going to start at 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So if I wanted to make this smaller, I would want to multiply, let's see, multiply by 0.1 perhaps. Let's try that. Now if we run this, first one's there, next one super tiny, next one's slightly bigger. You can see that each one gets 10% bigger. Interesting. So the first one is 1 times 0.1, which is 1/10. The next one is 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, and so on. You can see them moving along there. Very interesting what you can do with code once you start to understand what the possibilities are. I hope you have fun with creating objects using code, using this iterative variable, and we'll talk more about how you can use these iterative variables to create more interesting shapes. Until next time, think for yourself. Be that person you wish you could